Rick Hale, Rick Hale.
Ray Caldwell, Ray Caldwell.
Mojo Monday. How are you, sir?
Another beautiful Monday, sharing
It
wisdom and
is.
exploring life's complexities.
Well, listen, I'm excited about this series. We're going to kick off a new series today on negotiation. And negotiation seems like such a big term, but the reality is everything in life is we negotiate, right? We negotiate our time, we negotiate cost of things, we negotiate contracts, we negotiate with your kids. Everything's a little bit of a negotiation, right? Why don't you give us your definition of negotiation or how you think about it to start us off?
Well, negotiating to me could possibly be substituted with the word navigating. And what you're
Yeah,
navigating is an outcome that's desirable. So to me, negotiating is navigating desirable outcomes.
desirable
And to your
outcome.
point, man, we do that every day in every way. Just about every conversation to some degree has some navigable outcome that you'd want in it.
Yeah. And we usually are on one side of it, right? Like very rarely are we negotiating on both sides, where although we technically are, if you think about it, but the reality is we have a position that we're trying to negotiate an agreement around with somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, what do you kind of comes down to what are you willing to give up to gain? And that by definition is also another way to look at negotiating.
100%. So in our world, we're in real estate. And if you're listening to this, you've probably heard us say before, or a trainer of some kind say before, what is fair market value? It's really what a seller is willing to sell for and what a buyer is willing to pay. And that actually determines what fair market value is. And there is no formula to that. There is uh, a fairy tale perception of how to go about that. And maybe we'll give you some practical applicational thinking things today. We're going to cover the mindset around it today. And then we're going to move into in a couple of future series around some strategies. So from the context of mindset, Rick, going into a negotiation, how do you get your head right? Like, how should we be thinking?
Well, from a starting place, you have to understand or get clear about what you want as an outcome. If you're not clear, how could you possibly paint a picture or frame the scenario in a way that creates that ultimate win-win, which is the ultimate goal? But if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. So
Yeah.
getting clear with what you want and why you want it, and then being able to frame it effectively that's like step three.
Yeah. So we live in this culture of I want a deal. And I don't know if I've ever said it, I'm sure I have, but everybody says, hey, if I can get a deal, I'll do it. What does that
Right.
really mean? What am I saying if I make that statement to you?
Well, there's an element of return on investment that's satisfactory, exciting, and it's not always a financial deal. Maybe it's an experiential deal. Maybe it's, a self-image deal. Maybe the deal might be, does it make me feel better or act better or enjoy life at a next level? So just, yeah, the deal is just, is there a fair exchange?
A fair exchange. And it's not always money. Sometimes it's value. Sometimes it's a deal is what moves my life to where I want it to go. And I feel good about the process, right? Of
Well, what if it's time? Time is a
Yeah.
currency too.
Course. So
Yeah.
all that to say, there's probably some more questions we should ask when somebody says, hey, I'm looking for a deal, but we're going to cover ask better questions in one of our future sessions. So today, I really want to kind of go into the mindset around how you enter into negotiation. So kick us off.
So again, the first step is to determine what you want and then make sure you're clear in it, because I find, and maybe you do too, but think about this. How often do we negotiate for things out of principle or, without really connecting the dots on how important it is? Are we fighting for things that are irrelevant or less important? And so make sure if you're going to fight for something and have the risk in a relationship of maybe forcing your hand or having an outcome that doesn't feel like a win-win, make sure it's worth it. And so
Yeah.
that's that whole get clear. And the mindset piece is is this a fight worth fighting? You know, I've said this many times with my kids when they were growing up. I'd say, you know, they get into an argument or a fight over something trivial, but in that moment, it felt relevant, certainly relevant to them. And they'd come to me, you know, either crying or upset or disappointed, and they were trying to be right, you know, and the response I would conjure is, look, sometimes right is wrong. And the wrong piece is if being right makes a relationship wrong or harms, it is probably not worth it. So part of this mindset piece is it worth putting a moment in time or a relationship in jeopardy or denting or dinging it a worthy experience for the sake of being right or winning a certain element of a negotiation? And it's kind of funny. This is a real time bound story. But last night I was with my wife watching a live band, and you know I like the live band. They're good. They're really good. They're really talented. But it was close to 11:30, and I'm tired, and I'm kind of like, I'm ready. And I got the, oh, listen, when you decide you're going to go fishing for 6 hours, you don't hear it from me. This is my night. I want to stay a little longer. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And so she did a good job framing it in a way that made me recognize that, hey, that is a worthy negotiation and a worthy concession.
There you
So I
go.
thought it was funny. Like, even on a personal level, we're negotiating relationally with every
Always.
decision we make. And is
You
it
know,
worth it? And what's the benefit versus burden of that conversation?
yeah. So there are people that have that behavior style. And if you're one of those listening to this conversation, that you're a person that has to win at all costs, what would you say to somebody like that?
You're going to probably burn a few bridges, and you're probably going to have fewer friends. I mean, nobody wants to be taken advantage of. In fact, I think one of the core things that people want in a relationship is be liked and respected. And I feel like when you're in the presence of someone who's a taker, you know, there's lifters and leaners. That's another way to look at it. Are they
Yeah,
lifting or are they taking from you in the relationship? And if there's a disparity, disproportionate loss versus gain, the relationship won't thrive, man. It's like a lack of water and sun, and you know, that plant's not going to live well.
exactly. All right. So there's two concepts we want to talk to you about this morning around mindset. And the first one, Rick, I think you wanted to cover was zero sum. Why don't you start us there?
So there's this concept called the zero sum game, which is where if someone wins and someone else loses, then there's a zero sum because the net effect is that there was a transference of value somewhere in the mix. And that, again, there's a winner and a loser, and the net's zero because there's no collective gain. And so that goes back to what you were asking me about, you know, lifters versus leaners. Leaners play the zero sum game. Lifters play the I'm going to add enough value. I'm going to come from contribution and then allow the law of reciprocity to better favor an outcome that everyone feels good about. And so the zero sum game is again one of the it's a taker mentality, and it's a win at all cost mentality. And I think the collateral damage, I mean, it's kind of like you win the battle, but you don't win the war. I think the long-term benefits are greatly diminished when you play a zero sum game. So analyze, and it kind of goes back to the mentality that we have in our company that it's win-win or no deal. And even though it may be taken as a, you know, trivial statement or redundant, we use the term a lot. But if you really subscribe to it, man, you'll not only come away with more wins, but you'll come away with heightened and improved relationships.
Yeah. Well, that kind of takes me into what I wanted to talk about mindset was this concept of win or no deal. And it really actually comes out of Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yep.
But before you understand what win or no deal is, you got to understand the precipice of the different negotiation positions, if you will, that precede it. And the first one's lose lose.
Hmm.
So if you and I were negotiating, and I take the position that if you're going to lose and if I'm going to lose, then you have to lose. And we both enter into a transaction or a negotiation where we're anticipating us both losing. And should we even enter into that negotiation if we're both feeling like we're losing? We should probably walk away. And I know we're
Yeah.
going to talk about closing techniques, and walking away is one of the actually a closing technique, right? Like sometimes you should walk away. But lose is obviously the worst scenario here. And
Yeah.
it probably shouldn't be a transaction or even a negotiation. But then there's the one where I feel like I have to win and you have to lose. And really, Rick, I think that's kind of the zero sum game, right? Like I'm going
That's
to
it.
take a position that no matter what, I'm going to win. I don't care if you lose.
Right.
Um, on my side, I won, and I feel really good about winning. Yet the actual negotiation of it all left somebody in a zero sum, left somebody with that position where they felt like they were losing.
Right.
No, Rick, there's another weird one here, which is where I actually go into a negotiation saying I'm willing to lose so you can win, which is
Mhm.
lose win the other direction. And I struggle with this one. Have you ever dealt with anyone that's like, I'm willing to lose so you can win?
I mean, that's yeah, that's incredibly generous and not common in today's world where, most people operate from scarcity versus abundance. So that's an abundant thinking person. And there's no flaw in it. But let's back up for 1 second. The lose-lose thing you said, it hit
Yeah.
me. I had a guy once he was teaching a class and talked about negotiations, and he said, you've got a fair transaction when both parties leave a little disgruntled and disappointed. I'm like, what? Why does it have to be that way? Like, if both sides feel like they gave up too much, then even though it was fair. And I go, well, by definition, it's equal. There's equality in the equally
Yeah.
losing, but it's not, when you go to that, when you play the zero sum game, you eliminate collaboration. And when you eliminate collaboration, you fail to open up that whole mindset of how can I help plus the relationship, the environment for the transaction, and the outcome we're after. And so there's the power of eliminating that win-lose component, is that you encourage collaboration and you get clear on how both sides can feel great about it versus that, both sides disgruntled, it was equally damaging, so it was fair.
But if I'm representing somebody on my side, and obviously my position is we want to win or whatever winning means, sometimes there's this concept of win-win. Now, there's a flaw in win-win. And the flaw is that there's no premise of walking away. So if you're just in win-win, you're forced to come to almost an arbitration, or you're forced to come to a conclusion, and you have this perception in your mind that we have to have a win-win. So what Stephen Covey talks about in the book is there's really this fifth position. So we had lose lose, then we had I win, you lose, then we had I lose, you win, then we have this forced win-win, but then they have the optional choice of win-win or no deal, meaning it has to be a win for both of us. We both have to feel good about it, or we have the option to shake hands and say we just can't make it happen.
Yeah.
And that's a tough place to be, but ultimately that fifth position of win-win or no deal causes everybody to make a statement that says we want to feel good about this transaction or we won't make this transaction happen.
Yeah, and that encourages collaboration, and that the fear being taken advantage of, which is far more powerful than the opportunity that most negotiations present. It's a much more empowered, state to think about how you win-win versus the fear-based thinking of win-lose or the capacity to be taken advantage of. So that walk away thing, I mean, that was a big part of my value proposition to clients is, hey, no commission is worth more than our relationship. If it doesn't look like a win for you, I'll happily withdraw my role and hand you the keys to the kingdom, and you go manage it going forward, because again, the relationship more important. That's the or no deal part. And it was a very empowering statement because they recognized my intentions were purely unselfish and kind, loving, and professional.
Absolutely. So from a mindset perspective, I think we're advocating that you choose a win-win or no deal mindset in how you approach negotiations, because the zero sum in by definition is a win lose or lose win type scenario, and the others just don't necessarily create that lasting relational conclusion to a negotiation. So
Yeah,
everything's a negotiation in life. Nope.
100%. Every conversation is some in
Every
part
conversation.
negotiation because you're
Yeah.
navigating an outcome that's desirable in your own mind and heart.
Yeah. And I think if you're listening to us today and you've been operating your business, and I refer to it as like a trail of broken glass behind you, because there's a lot of people that walked away from transactions in your world, whether they were on your representation or not, and they didn't feel good about the transaction. Ultimately, your business will suffer long term from a relational perspective.
Yeah,
So it's all about compromise, uh, putting yourself in the other person's shoes, and but representing you and your clients well from a win-win or no deal perspective.
absolutely. And it's more than just your clients, just one more layer of perspective. You know, that if you're a top 20% or strive to be a top 20% in our industry, you and the rest of the top 20% are doing 80% of the volume. You're going to see the same names and faces. And the more seeds of positivity you plant and the mindset, the more firm you are and committed to a win-win, you know, the agent community is going to rally, and they have an opinion and a choice, and they have influence. And when they drive past three houses that might meet their agent, you know, their client's needs, even if it's subconscious, they're going to fight for the opportunity to work with the better agent that they can trust, and they know that, you know, they're authentic and transparent, but also tenaciously bound by, you know, the rules of the road that a win-win creates.
100%. And we're speaking specifically to the real estate industry, but this is everything in life. Like you know, when we were preparing for this call, you were saying, hey, even in retail you can negotiate, right? Like it's not your kids is a negotiation. So how do you have a win-win or no deal with your kids? How do you have a win-win or no deal with the salesperson at Nordstrom's? Like
Yeah.
how, what would you say to that?
I mean, the easy answer is what's in it for them. If you can figure that out and then overlay what your goals are, again, that whole desire for an outcome, man, you align those two, that force becomes collaborative, and they'll do what it takes to help you find that space, knowing that they win with you.
There you go.
But
So we're
kids
excited.
aren't hard. They can be complicated and hard, but often, you know, to ask what a kid wants and then figure out a way to navigate it. But here are the rules for accomplishing that. You know, that's we're just adults running around, and you know, we're kids running around in adult bodies.
Yeah.
We want to
You
be
know,
liked,
somebody told me,
respected, and we want to win.
somebody said one time, they said, one of the best things you can adopt in life is it's not say no, it's say yes with conditions.
Yeah,
And when you adopt that in life, you're really saying, hey, here's what the win win or no deal looks like for me. I will
yeah,
say yes with these conditions. And if these conditions are a win for you and you choose that that's a win, we created a win win or no deal.
yeah. That's a nugget, man. I hope you guys wrote that down. That take that to heart. Under what circumstances does that create a win-win for both of us? By never saying no, you've always empowered collaboration and a quality next level conversation.
Yeah. So from a negotiation standpoint, Rick, there's usually two people, obviously, the concept of different sides. Let's say I show up with the win-win or no deal mindset, but the person on the other side of the negotiation is not necessarily that way. From a mindset perspective, how should I approach that?
I think you have to, once again, your mindset needs to be, is this important enough to me that I'll do whatever it takes to win? And it may be that you find yourself in a zero sum game. If that's their love language or their way of approaching things or the way they navigate and negotiate, you know, you kind of have to mirror and match that energy in order to not get taken advantage of if their sole MO is to win or lose, you know, it's win or lose, you know, die by the sword. But the other option is to say no. And there are clients that are like this that want to take more than they give, and they drain you versus, you know, empowering, you know, a better energy, if you will. And so one of the most liberating things you can do is back to the walk away comment you made earlier is to just recognize that there are people that align better with you, and there's probably another opportunity that creates a more healthy outcome. And that saying no, no is a complete sentence, and walking away from relationships that aren't empowering and collaborative, and that's sometimes the most healthy of all choices.
Well, instead of saying no, say, we're probably going to walk away from this transaction unless these conditions are met. And that's me saying yes with conditions, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm saying no. But I'm being clear.
Yeah.
Instead of saying we're going to walk away, I'm going to say we're choosing to walk away in light of these conditions weren't met. And that's me saying we wouldn't, or that's my win with conditions, right? My yes with conditions. And I just kind of want to summarize a little bit of what we're talking about today, because in my life, the year of 2024 is the year of the professional. And to be a professional, you definitely have to be top of your game around negotiation. And that's one of the reasons we're excited to kick the year off with a series on negotiation, because I believe this is a professional characteristic that we all work on and need to improve upon. And it's just such a timely, really, really powerful concept we need to improve upon.
Absolutely. Join us next time as we continue to advance this conversation. It's an exciting topic because it's about gaining things in life that you want and making sure that the people around you also get what they need. Man, if you pull, the more often you're able to complete that circle, man, life gets better and it's more enriching.
Yeah. So if this week, if we threw out a challenge, yeah, hopefully you're negotiating a transaction or something that puts revenue into your life, but there's other transactions in your life that you will be negotiating, and just bring it to your conscious brain of what's my mindset as I'm approaching this transaction, and just be consciously aware. And that way we can start to make improvements around our thinking.
Yeah, and think about it in terms of conversations you're having with your inner circle, your friends, your family, your kids, and just pay closer attention to the outcome of statements or requests, or again, it kind of comes back to negotiating or navigating the situation that how you want it to evolve, and just pay attention to the words you choose and the effect it has. And is it enhancing the experience and opportunity in your behalf, or is it depreciating or eliminating some of the outcomes you're after? And then work on the idea of tweaking those. And we're going to give you some skills and scripts as we continue down the road of this ongoing conversation for Mojo Monday.
Rock and roll. Rick, it is my favorite day of the week. It is Mojo Monday. Have a good week, sir.
You do the same. We love you guys. Keep swinging.
Always.